So for this month's Itawamba Cattleman Association meeting, we had Dr. Brett Rushing from Mississippi State up to talk to us about foraging. If you're interested in foraging for cattle and hay quality, this is the video for you. I've integrated the slides he spoke to on your screen, so you should be able to follow along with what he's speaking to. And I also include the links that he referenced in the description of this video, so you can find out more for yourself. Dr. Rushing was a little bit limited on time, and I didn't hit record at the very beginning, but he really was a fantastic resource and wealth of information for what we did get to cover. Without further ado, here's Dr. Rushing now.
I'm with Mississippi State University. I'm located down in Newton at the Coastal Plain Experiment Station. So for those of you that aren't familiar, we have 16 off-campus research and extension research centers. Coastal Plains is one of those that's down there in Newton. We're 1,100 acres. We've got beef cattle, timber, and row crop production. And so not only do I have a research and an extension appointment, but also run that farm, that experiment station. So I get to do the day-to-day activities of moving cattle and all the research, the day-to-day work comes to research. But then I have an extension appointment, which means I get to come and deliver programs like tonight. So I get to do a little bit of everything. Marie, is it Marie or Mary? Marie, okay. She asked me to come and deliver a forage-related program, so that's kind of my background is beef cattle management as it pertains to forages and soil management. And so I had the opportunity to give this talk at a Farm Bureau meeting a couple weeks ago, and so when she asked me to do this, it kind of fit right in hand. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight is forages and beef cattle systems. And this is real informal. I've got lots of pictures. I'd love to have conversation with you. So if you got questions or you disagree with something I say or you agree, amen, or hey, tell me to stop and say it again. But I like to have it just kind of a real informal talk, and we'll just talk about whatever it is that's on your mind. But from an organizational standpoint, we'll talk a little bit about defining risk. And so when I say risk in our beef cattle systems, what comes to your mind as far as risk?
Rainfall.
Sir?
Rainfall.
Rainfall, yeah. All right, so drought mitigation, drought insurance, ways to manage our beef cattle in the anticipation of drought. So y'all are not as bad, but I've been in Southwest Mississippi over the past couple weeks, and it's pretty ugly down there. They are still recovering. They've got a lot of dead wood on the sides of roads. If y'all hadn't had a chance to go down through there, but I've got a few pictures of that part of the country. But a drought is coming. It's inevitable. It may not be last year, maybe this year. We never know. Like the gentleman said earlier, our weather, all the things that we're involved with are in the hands of God. And so when it comes to drought management, it's simply anticipating something that's probably going to come down the road. But when we think about our forages and beef cattle, how do we anticipate drought? How do we manage our forages to anticipate drought? How do we actually measure forages in our beef cattle system? Most of the time when we think about managing beef cattle, we have the costs at the sale barn, in terms of our returns, our profit. But in terms of managing the cost, how do we actually measure how much hay we're producing, manage how much hay we're producing, and then how do we kind of figure out a way to measure those variables? And again, I've got a bunch of pictures that we can discuss. So whatever it is that you're discussing, I like to define the terms. Nowadays we have a hard time to defining what a man is and what a woman is. And so tonight we're going to define what production risk is. And so production risk, according to USDA, says it's derived from the uncertain natural growth processes of crops and livestock. Weather, disease, pests, and other factors affect both the quantity and the quality of commodities produced. Okay, and so when we think about the quantity and quality of forages, how do we measure quantity? most of the time we're thinking about, number of bales per acre. I got, 3 bales per acre. I've got this many bales in the hay barn, but if we're looking out at a pasture and we've got, mama cows that are grazing, or, maybe they're pairs, how can we measure the amount of forage that's out there at their, that's available for them to actually graze? Do we have a way to measure that? How many days of grazing do I have in this particular pasture? Those are the kinds of things that I'm wanting us to think about. But then, the main underlying factor right there is the other factor. So when you consider weather, disease, pests, and other factors, what is the other factor? Or what is another factor? We're all sitting in this room. We are one of those other factors. So how are we actually managing the forages that we're actually producing? And what are some of the management decisions that we make that can impact the quantity and the quality of the grass or the forage system that we have? All right, this is a quote that I've been using lately, but this is Lord Kelvin. So if any engineers in the room, y'all familiar with the measurement of temperature and pressure, but he basically, one of the things that he's most quoted for, is that if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So if you take that step further, I've got another quote. It says, if you don't know what you want to manage, you're wasting your time measuring. And so when we think about hay production, when we think about forage management systems, if we don't know what it is that we're actually trying to measure, whether that's bales per acre, whether that's 15% crude protein, whether that's the nutritional requirements of a lactating cow. I mean, if we don't know what it is that we're trying to measure, then we're kind of really wasting our time measuring, if you will. And so that's kind of what I want to talk about tonight, is how we measure quantity and quality. All right, so when you look at this picture, I'll try to get out of the way. When you look at this picture, how much does this picture cost? Can we quantify the costs that are in this picture?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. What can we quantify?
All of the equipment.
All right. So you've got an alley. You've got a head gate. You've got a labor. All right. How much does labor cost?
Building.
How much?
The building.
Oh yeah, the building cost.
Part of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. All right. You've got electricity. You've got water down there on the bottom. There's actually a heifer that's in that head gate that's getting synchronized for breeding AI work. All right. So she costs. All right. So I mean, these are all tangible things that we can put our hands on and we can measure. Okay. So I've got $18 an hour labor. How many of us pay ourselves when we're coming up with our enterprise budgets? We all get paid, right? Nobody? All right. Replacement heifer, squeeze chute, electricity, alley panels, facility, these are all the things that we measure, but they all have values. Okay, so what about this picture? How much does that cost?
Today is all.
Today it is a lot. So to maintain that cow right there on an annual basis, how much does it cost to maintain her year round? Any ideas? Ballpark? All right. According to USDA, her maintenance costs, this is not sale price or anything, her maintenance costs, feed bill, vet bill, everything, about $1,700. What about that calf? Any idea? All right. Yeah. All right. So this was about a week ago. That was $287 a hundredweight. So, but what else is in this picture that we have not talked about as cost?
Hey, grass.
All right. All right. So.
Land.
All right, land costs, there's a fence, that's exactly right. So how much does all this cost? On that bottom there.
It's expense.
That's an expense? All right, so my point behind this is when we think about her and that calf, you know, we often see, I mean, y'all get the market bulletin or y'all get livestock reports each week, or I don't know where you get all your information from, but we can see sale price on things. Anybody get the market bulletin, Mississippi Market Bulletin? All right, I enjoy looking at the market bulletin. That's kind of one of our main sources as far as buying and selling hay across the state. How much is a roll of hay right now? If you had some and you were going to sell it, what would you sell it for? $40. 50. Okay. Why? Why 40? Why 50?
Demand. That's about all I get out of it.
Yeah.
Cost you put in.
Yeah. Cost you put in. Okay. All right. We'll get into that here in a minute. But my main point is when we think about her, oftentimes we're not. I mean, this is just kind of a byproduct. This is. I mean, we spend a lot of time doing it. We know why we're doing it. But at the same time, do we really know how much money we're spending on it, and how much are we getting out of it? Because she's not concerned about pounds or bales per acre. What she's concerned about is the nutritional quality of what she's getting. Can she meet the milk demand to get that calf to a weaning weight? All right. You're concerned about that too, but bales per acre is one way that we measure things, but bales per acre don't mean nothing to her. It's how much protein is in there, how much energy, how much fat is in what it's actually getting, so that she can take care of that calf. And so oftentimes the quality aspect is kind of an anomaly. We just really don't even know how to think about it. All right.
Are you gonna have us and you may not have a handout or not, but we always say around here 5 bales per winter for that cow.
Uh-huh.
Y'all got any handouts for that?
We do.
Good.
I'll get into that. All right. So when you see this picture, how much does that cost? Is that one of y'all's trailers and trucks?
Depends on the quality of the hay, I guess.
Depends on the quality. All right.
Say 500.
All right. Is that good? Is that picture good? Y'all say no. Why?
Poor quality.
About half rotten. All right. So on a typical 4x5 bale, the outer 6 inches represents about 30% of the volume of that bale. All right. So basically, you're eliminating 30%. So if you got, I'll do the math easy. If you got 18 rolls on there, 6 of them are basically trash. Did I do my math right? Is that right? No, maybe not. We'll figure that out. But basically, my point behind that is when we consider the quantity and quality, we go down to our neighbor and we say, hey, I need 20 rolls. I mean, is that all we ask for? Is that all we're selling? I mean, I've got 20 rolls of hay for sale. I mean, what does that even mean? Do we know? These are just questions I want us to think about. All right, so let's transition from hay to standing forage. Can anybody tell me what the difference between on the left and the right hand side of that picture?
Right side's a lot fuller and greener.
That's right. Right side's fuller and greener. Can you tell me why?
Fertilized chemicals,
No. There's no difference in fertility on the left and right hand side.
different type of product, different type of grain.
All right, so on the left hand side you have no-till, Marshall, annual ryegrass at 25 pounds per acre. On the right you have no-till, Marshall, annual ryegrass with crimson clover. That is the only difference. You've got a crimson clover planted with that Marshall annual ryegrass. No difference in fertility, same field, same grazing, same soil test analysis. The only difference is we've included an annual clover. And so when we think about, and so based off of yield, so we notice a significant difference on the left and right based off of yield. What about quality? So, somebody said better. Right.
No comparison to quality.
All right, you can see the quality. All right, so annual ryegrass is a high quality forage, particularly when it's fertilized. What about clovers?
high nitrogen content, high energy.
All right, so Clovers, one of God's miracles, he created plants that can take atmospheric nitrogen out of the air, out of the soil air, combined with bacteria that's growing in the soil, and it forms nodules on the roots of these plants that creates their own nitrogen source. You don't have to fertilize clovers with nitrogen; they make their own. And so nitrogen is the main element in the building blocks of amino acids. Amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. All right, and so when we increase nitrogen content of our forages, we're increasing the protein content. When our animals consume higher quality forages that have higher nitrogen levels, they put on more muscles and they produce more milk. All right, and so when we think about the cows that we have and the nutritional requirements that they have, one of the cheapest ways that we can get protein into them is by planting an annual clover and combining that with ryegrass. And this required no additional nitrogen application. It was just putting clover in the mix with the seed.
Hey, right there though, Brett, given where we at located, okay?
Yeah.
June, July, that's going away.
Right. That's right. We're gonna get into that. Yeah.
Okay, good deal.
All right. So and this is cool season options. All right. But when we think about annual ryegrass across the state of Mississippi, we plant several 100,000 acres in cool season annual forages every year. Ryegrass is kind of, central south. That's our bread and butter. But just again, get you thinking about clovers, adding species to our pastures to kind of help increase the quality of the grass that we've got, or the quality of the feedstuffs that we
Out
have.
of all those clovers, which one is best for versus weight gain? You said that's crimson clover, but I've always had to look with Ladina clover.
Yeah. So all of them are typically going to be within a 5 to 10% range as far as nutritional value. All right, so they're all going to be in the upper teens to low 20s in terms of crude protein. They're all going to be in the upper 50s to low 60s in terms of TDN. The differences between all the varieties and species is based on whether it's an annual or a perennial, whether it's early, mid, or late maturing. All right,
Well,
so
Ladina's perennial.
that's right. So Ladina it's a white clover. It's a perennial clover. It'll come back every year. Crimson clover is an annual. You got to replant it or allow it to reseed every year. So each one of them has advantages or disadvantages, but in terms of weight gain, and again, crimson clover, because it's an annual, is typically going to produce more biomass in the spring, because if you think about the history of that plant, it has to produce seed and then it dies. Whereas white clover, if it's established, it does not have to produce seed because it's going to come back from its roots every year. But it's going to produce less biomass in a given amount of time, but more over the year. Whereas crimson clover is going to produce more biomass within a shorter period of time, and then the rest of the year it's not there. And so it all goes back to, like, if I've got, let's just say I'm weaning calf, I've got a set of calves that I'm trying to wean, and I'm trying to capitalize like on a May, June sale barn price. All right, but then I've got them weaned, and I can graze them for 60 to 90 days in the spring. But I'm trying to do it cheaply. I'm not trying to buy a bunch of feed. I can plant an annual ryegrass with an annual clover, graze it out, and then be done with that when those calves go to the sale barn. I mean, it's just kind of mixing and matching. We grow we can grow over 30 different forage species in the state of Mississippi. Over 30 species. I mean, one of the questions I always get is like, when are we going to come up with a grass that grows year-round, is drought-tolerant, and doesn't require nitrogen, is high quality? God did not create that species. Okay? We haven't found it yet if he did. And so my point is, over the 30 different species that we have, we can break our pastures up and plant different species to mix and match according to the nutritional requirements of the animals that we have, right? All right, so this was a picture down in Summit last September. So how do you measure the quantity and quality of the grass in that picture? Can you see it? It's essentially non-existent. All right, a bunch of weeds. That's exactly right. So in terms of quantity and quality, we are anticipating this happening by utilizing this, by extending our grazing season, complementing different forage species that will, so when this actually happens, we do have hay in the barn. We do have grass in our pastures to extend that grazing season. I get there will come a time when grass is limited because, we've grazed it all out and we have to rely on other sources. But the point is to provide some sort of assurance that when that comes, we'll have, what's the cheapest source of feed that we can feed our cattle? Grass, all right. Grass, forage, regardless of nitrogen costs, regardless of seed costs, typically is about 70% cheaper. Is about 70% cheaper than hay that we can feed. All right, 70% cheaper. Anything out of a bin, out of a sack, out of a commodity shed, that's going to be more expensive. And so, as y'all know, the name of the game is not necessarily how much money we can make. It's a lot of times it's about how much money we can save, right? All right. We've talked about nutrition. All right. So here's this table basically just kind of gives you some general parameters on the dry matter yield per acre, crude protein TDN characteristics of different forage species. But basically the point is we have annual grasses, we have perennial grasses. We have annual legumes, we have perennial legumes. We have most of our forbs are typically annual, but we have cool seasons, we have warm seasons, and this goes back to my point. We've got a lot of different species, and I may be stepping on toes, but there are more species than what your local co-op carries. Okay, all right. If your local co-op carries 2 varieties of annual ryegrass and some food plot stuff, we annually test over 50 varieties of annual ryegrass every year. About 20 different varieties of small grains like cereal rye, oats, triticale, about 20 different varieties of annual and perennial clovers. My point is there's more stuff out there than what most of our co-ops are willing to carry, because they've got to move it, and I get that. But my challenge to you is to kind of think outside the box and see what else is out there. More characteristics. All right, so when we talk about nutritional demands of our cows, so when we were getting served tonight, what types of food did we get? We got proteins, we got starches. All right, we got carbohydrate. What starch turns into carbohydrate and sugars, and we have different types of sugars at the end. All right, but when it comes to meeting the nutritional requirements of our body, why do we choose the foods that we get? Oftentimes, a lot of it has to do with taste. But if we choose to eat a salad, most of the time it's because, hey, I need some fiber in my diet, need to get some stuff going, moving. But we're making choices to meet the nutritional requirements that we have. When it comes to a cow or a calf or a yearling or whatever it is, do we know what they actually need? All right. And so this table just kind of has some general parameters, and the one I always kind of point to. So you got a mature cow, she's 1,200 pounds, 2 months postpartum, versus a mature cow, 1,200 pounds, non-lactating, she's dry. Basically, if you go down here to crude protein values, she needs a feed stuff that's about 11% crude protein, the one that's lactating, versus the dry cow is only 7%. Okay. When it comes to TDN, her needs about 60% TDN compared to only 48% on a dry cow. So depending on her stage of development in terms of milking, peak milk. Is she dry? Is she first trimester? You know, that determines her physiological needs and the nutrition that we have to be able to provide to her. Any thoughts on what I've said so far? Any questions?
So that's just another thing though that some of us consider and some of us do. If you calve all at the same time, the nutritional values of the cow is going to be the same.
All right, so and we can have this conversation and argument or however you want to put it. So when we're calving year round, it's very cheap in terms of labor. It's very easy to accomplish. But when you think about meeting nutritional requirements, all right, your group of cows are always in flux. All right, they're calving, they're milking, they're dry, and so when your herd is always in flux, that means you're always either overfeeding or underfeeding. Because how many of you have an individual stall for every cow? Well, she's dry, so she gets this much. Well, she gets this much. We don't feed like that. And so when we take a bucket of feed out and put it in that trough, boss cow gets what she wants, but everybody else kind of gets the same, whether she's milking or not. And so we're either overfeeding or underfeeding when we do that. But if we calve, we have a calving season, an organized calving season, we can mix and match our forage species to meet the nutritional requirements that she has cheaper than by over or under feeding throughout the entire year. That makes sense. And plus, when you have a calf crop, they are typically a more uniform calf crop. You get marketing advantages by doing that. But my main point of emphasis is trying to figure out cheaper ways to feed our cows, and that's by getting a timed calving season. All right. So, how many of us have ever sent a hay sample in? Did you know you could take a hay sample? All right. Have you ever taken a soil sample? All right. So we all take a soil sample. So why do we take a soil sample? All right. So to see how efficient or deficient our soils are to meet the nutritional requirements of our soils. Okay. When it comes to taking a hay sample or a forage sample, it's the same thing. If I take a hay sample, I can get back the crude protein and the fiber components of that feed, and I can say, well, heck, my hay ain't no good. You can look at her and see her calf and know but we can figure out, well, if I've got 7% crude protein on my hay, I need to feed this much supplement to meet her needs. All right. So this table right here represents 1,500 samples that were submitted to the Mississippi State Chemical Lab for forage analysis since 2017. And what I did is I highlighted grass hay. So majority of our samples are grass hay samples, dry grass hay, 1,300 samples. Of those 1,300 samples, the average crude protein was 8.84%. The average TDN was 46%. All right. That's 1,300 samples over 6 years. So when we go back and we think about nutritional requirements of let's just take a mature cow, she's lactating. She needs about 11% crude protein and 60% TDN. We ain't getting there on the hay that we're producing. And so what does that mean? Well, we run to the co-op and we buy some feed, buy a few sacks, get a ton of this, a ton of that to mix with our feed, because we're spending all this daggum time producing hay and it ain't worth enough. And so we spend more to compensate for the deficits of the hay that we're actually producing. Y'all follow me? Agree, disagree? Is this new?
It's new. You can see it though,
All right.
by the numbers.
All right. So let's talk some more about hay. So we've talked about the cost of these pictures. How much does that picture cost?
Thought about 80,000.
Shoot, you wanna touch it?
All right.
Last one in Texas, let's say it's $150,000.
Let's do this. Let's don't talk about anything green. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about everything else. How much does that cost?
Fires cost fortune.
You talking about the hay?
I'm talking about the hay. So how much I've already asked y'all. Y'all said $40 to $50. Why?
Diesel fuel.
Fuel.
Well, but do we actually know that it costs $40, or is it because my neighbor is selling at $40 and I trust him? And okay. Have any of you ever figured out how much a roll of hay costs you? No. Why? You have? How much it costs you?
Yeah, not lately, but I have figured it out.
All right.
I'm not
Well,
gonna break even,
no, you're
not
not.
here.
No. Okay. Where would you start? All right.
It's
We were talking-
impossible for us to figure out the true cost, because you have to figure in land costs, equipment costs, and all that, but you got to figure
I've
out
got
the
it
rest
to-
costs about all we can figure out.
I got a tool for you. All right. So every year, the Agricultural Economics Department on campus has an enterprise budget spreadsheet for every commodity grown, whether it's catfish, soybeans, corn, forages, hay. We have an enterprise budget spreadsheet that takes the previous year's statewide average costs, whether it's fertilizer, herbicide, insecticide, equipment costs, labor, fuel, sale prices. It takes all that into consideration, and it develops an enterprise budget spreadsheet to help you come up with a cost of how much it costs to produce a round bale of hay. And the best thing that I can say about this this spreadsheet is in the back it has an appendices. All right, you go back to that appendices and you say, well, hey, I've got a 115 horse tractor. How do I figure out how much that cost per acre is? It's in there. All right, it may not be exact, it's statewide average, but it's a starting place. It has a cost per acre amount to operate a 115 horsepower tractor with labor and fuel in the tractor. All right, how much does it cost to run a large round baler? It's in there. How much does it cost to run a rate tedder? It's in there. Even net wrap, it's in there. Fertilizer, herbicide, insecticide, all those costs on a per acre basis are in there. You just go and grab those values and plug and play, and you can come up with how much it actually costs you. All right, so let me show you this. All right, so we have 35 acres of Summerall, 007 Summerall hybrid Bermuda grass there at Newton. And so every year I have to budget a certain amount for hay, certain amount for crops, certain amount for beef cattle, certain amount for timber, etc. This is how I figure my hay budget off of 35 acres. So in 2023, we had 3 cuttings. All right, I've got my urea costs, I've got my litter costs. We use a lot of litter. I've got Grazing P+D, Mustang, and Intrepid. So I had to spray for army worms and stem maggots. Those are my insecticide applications. I've got net wrap. I've got custom applications. So if you, let's just say you call a co-op and say, hey, come spread whatever. I've got a custom applicator cost. All right, so for harvest, I've got an 8-foot disc mower. Run an 8-foot disc mower. I think with the mower was with a 115 horse tractor. That's $17.16 per acre per cutting. You multiply that out times 3 cuttings. It cost me $51 per acre to actually lay it down over 3 cuttings. All right. I've got a 17-foot tedder cost, double rate, large round baler. I've even got a 20-foot trailer cost to get it out of the field and into the barn. All right, you add all that up, multiply it times 3, that was $686.55 per acre.
How many rows did you get per acre?
We're gonna get there.
Okay.
All right. Any thoughts on that?
And that's in the thing that you said, that's in the handout.
That's right.
Okay.
Well, so the values are in the appendices,
Right.
but I just went and got the ones that I actually used and added them up. All right. So so last year, a single harvest cost me $228.85. Again, multiply that times 3, 686. I had 35 acres. That was $24,029.25. All right, I've got dry matter yield. All right, so every time I go out and do a cutting, all right, I will measure the amount of biomass that's out there, and we can talk more about that. I can show you how to do that if you want, but I've got basically a known volume where I can go out there and I'll clip the amount of grass that I've got, and I can calculate the volume of grass in any given hayfield that I've got, and that's how I come up with that number. All right, so my cumulative yield, tons of dry matter per acre per year, is about 5.5 tons. So if I account for about 12% moisture, you know, we typically bale around that, that's over 6 tons of hay. So off of 3 cuttings, that's a little over 2 tons per acre per year. All right, so you break that down, cost per ton, $112.55 per ton. A 4x5 1,000-pound bale costs me $56.27. All right. I also have crude proteins and TDN values. So for those samples that I clip to figure out dry matter yield, I also measure my bales and determine crude protein and TDN. Average crude protein was 16.1% crude protein. My TDN though was about 50%. And the reason my TDN was so low is because my first and second cuttings were on schedule. My second cutting was in July. I didn't get another cutting until October. And so basically I had about, 75 days between my second and third cutting. And so that last cutting was basically a cleanup cutting. It was tall and rank, but it was a drought. And so we didn't produce as much. And so that's why as grass matures, it becomes less digestible, your TDN value goes down, and so that's why my average TDN for those 3 lots was only 50%. Probably if I just looked at my first 2, it'd be over 55, but that last one is what pulled me down. All right, so I have 4x5 1,000-pound bale. My bales average about 1,000 pounds. All right, have we ever weighed a bale? So, all right, why would we weigh a bale?
I know how much truckload weighs in
That's right.
Missouri.
Yeah. All right. Know how much? So when we,
Have
a lot of,
the weight too.
that's right. So a lot of folks, especially outside the Southeast, will sell based off of weight. All right. But you know, us trading in this room, give me 20 bales. I already heard you talk about replacing belts on your baler. How tight is your bale?
That's pretty tight.
It's pretty tight. Well, how much is pretty tight?
It's probably 800-pound bale for the 9. Maybe.
Okay. How much does your bale weigh?
800,000 pounds. I ain't never weighed it.
Yeah. So
I know what
mean,
the trailer
200
box when I load it.
200 pounds times a load. Let's just say you got 20 bales, 200 pounds. I mean, that's a lot of grass in differences in the bale size. And so if we don't know how much our bales weigh, we really don't know how much biomass we're actually producing. We don't know if we're getting a good deal, if we're making a good deal to our neighbor, if we're actually selling what it is that we're advertising. All right, how much time, y'all? You want to keep going, or y'all want to?
Okay.
It's 640.
We can keep going a little bit. All right. Let's talk about. All right, another tool. So along with the forage planning or the forage enterprise budget, we have an Excel calculator, hay inventory calculator. How much hay do I need to be able to overwinter my cows? All right. Well, typically I feed 3 bales per cow. I mean that's kind of a revolving target. That all depends on the quality of the bale and actually how many, or the weight of the bale itself. And so we actually have an Excel calculator where you can take the class of animal you've got that you plan on feeding. You can take the nutritive values of the hay that you're producing, so the protein and the TDN values. You can enter those in, tell it how many animals we've got, and it'll spit out how many bales you need of that quality of hay. And if at the end it says basically if you're in deficit or in excess of nutritive values, and if you're in deficit, it'll recommend how many extra pounds of protein that you need to compensate for the deficit in the hay that you're feeding. All right, and that's all just in a plug and play spreadsheet. Just enter the values of the hay analysis that you've got, the animals that you've got, and it'll say, you need this many. All right. All right, so let's let's get back to risk. So when we think about hay production, I mean, everything that we do is a risk. Driving here tonight was a risk. But when you think about meeting the nutritional demand of the animals that we have, what are ways that we can manage our forages that help mitigate impending risk? So mitigate drought, impending stress. So one of the ways that we can do that is through improved grazing management. All right. So when I say grazing management, what do y'all think about?
Rotation.
All right. So rotational grazing is one. All right. So if you look out at just any given pasture, what percent utilization of the grass do you think we're actually getting? A lot of us are probably pushing 100% because we're overstocked. All right. But when you look at it in any given pasture, there are areas in any given field where they're underneath that tree all the time in the summer. They've got a well-worn trail between that tree and the pond or the ditch, and between that tree and the ditch, man, they got it as clean as this table. But over there out in the sunshine, they go over there maybe an hour or two in the evenings, and they really don't put a lot of pressure on that grass. We're not getting utilization across that field. All right, you are now working for her as opposed to your cows working for you. Their job is to go out and eat grass, produce milk, and make beef. And so one of the ways that we can do that is to basically force them into those spaces where they typically would not go. One of the best ways to do that is using hot wire. If we can section off our pastures and force them into areas where they typically would not go, that increases the utilization of a field, increases a pounds per acre production of your land, because beef cattle, just like any other ag enterprise, is a land utilization exercise. Is my ground good for planting pine trees? I want to plant a pine tree across the entire span. I don't want any ground left over. Are my cows just utilizing this quarter acre over this 10-acre field? We want to maximize the use of our land, and using hot wire to force them over there is one way we can do that. All right, so utilization. So this is a grazing management trial that I've got where I'm comparing different stocking rates, but this goes back to that same picture where I had annual clover or crimson clover and annual ryegrass. Kind of our rule of thumb when it comes to managing forages. So like if we have just kind of a generic rule of thumb, typically we like to graze a third, stomp a third into the ground, and then leave a third. All right, and so by partitioning our pastures off and by forcing the utilization of our pastures, what that will enable us to do is, think about. All right, so how do we know our cows are stressed out? Do our cows get stressed out?
Yes.
All right, how do we know that they are?
Loss of weight.
Loss of weight, so body condition. All right, producing a lower weaning weight calf. What else? Refusing feed, panting, tongue sticking out, all that sort of stuff. How do we know our forages are stressed?
Brown?
And brown,
They're
yeah,
not growing.
yeah, they're not growing. All right, so imagine this table is basically your pasture. All right, I would say between 50 and 60% of a plant's biomass is below ground. All right, and so when you have a stand of grass and you are constantly clipping it, mowing it. All right, what's the first, you said brown, somebody said brown. When you're mowing your grass in the summer, what's the first thing that turns brown in your yard? The spots that are cut the shortest and that are clipped most frequently. All right, the grass that's a little bit taller is the stuff that you say, well, I'll get to that next week, I'll cut it next time, and it's greener and taller. It responds quicker to regrowth because it is not stressed. When you have a stand of grass that is continually being clipped, it is constantly trying to scavenge for more water and for more nutrients. Because when you clipped it its nutrients, its capacity to take sunlight energy and combine that with the nutrients in the soil to make sugars, it's eliminated. All right. And so when you can raise that stands height, that grass stands height, to allow it to scavenge for water more easily, it allows better root growth and development. Because basically, it's like when those grasses get clipped off, it's like taking a cold shower. They shrivel up, their roots get really shallow, and they start stressing out. It's like, where can I find nutrients to be able to compensate for my head getting chopped off? All right. When we think about our forages, the way we manage them, they are getting stressed as well. Repeated, constant, close grazing that's the surefire way of stressing your grass out. And the longer it takes for that grass to come back. All right. And so if we've got a wide open pasture and all our cows are in this pasture, they've got free access to everything, they're gonna come back and hit that same spot all the time. And then over here, out in the sun, they're not gonna come back because eventually, I mean, it's hot. I don't wanna be out there because it's hot. It's gonna get tall and rank. As forage grows in maturity, it gets lower in quality, all right? And so that nutritional demand is not being met because we're not using it and it's no longer meeting her requirements, all right?
One thing, Brett, right
All
here,
right.
I know we're gonna have to wind this up, but a question for me, okay? We see the clover, we see the ryegrass and things of that nature. One of the biggest things in hay quality is weeds,
Yeah.
or loss of fertilizer to weed compared to grass.
Yeah.
Okay, when you do a forage such as this, okay, some of that, all of that's gonna go away with the heat. Okay, thistle, cypress weed. How does the chemical aspect of that go into your plan?
All right. We routinely use broadleaf herbicides to manage all our broadleaf weeds and all our pastures. All right.
Every
Year.
Well, does timing play a part because?
Yeah. So herbicide timing. So based on the weed species and the competition that you have, there are herbicide products that we make recommendations based off of the species, the complexities, and the amounts, the biomass amounts of the weeds that you have in any given pasture. All right. And so over time, yes, we would like to say you would all but eliminate, weed competition, dog fennel or cedar weed, Cherokee rose, thistles, buttercups. Everybody thinks our state wildflower is buttercup, but I mean, all of our pastures are full of yellow flowers in the spring. We typically don't spray for those. I don't know why, because all that grass that's underneath is fighting for light. All right. But yes, weed control is definitely one of those ways that we use in combination with grazing management, different species to mix and match to make nutritional forage feedstuffs that are cheaper.
Is there a herbicide that won't kill clover?
All right, so there are new products that have come out. There's several. All right, so there's Duracore. There's a new formulation of Grazing that's supposed to be less volatile in its impact on clovers. So I would, in terms of residual, your Grazing Next and your Grazing P plus D have those residuals that will control clovers. But most of the time when people have questions on broadleaf applications, but they have clovers, typically their clover stand is less than 10% of their entire field. And so when we have folks that are scared of using a herbicide because they're going to kill their clover, typically we recommend at least a 30% stand of clover before we even take that into consideration. If I don't have that much clover, I'm spraying, because the benefits of those clovers does not outweigh the problems that you have with the weeds that are in your pasture.
Good answer.
Good question. Yes, sir.
Because I don't spray my pasture till June, July because of my clover.
Right. But you got thistle all over the place.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
But
right.
if I like in these pastures right here, they have not been sprayed for probably going on 5 years now. I don't have any thistle in them, but they're eat up with horse nettle. So when my crimson clover is out, I can spray products after my clover is done that will control my horse nettle, but then the residual is out by the time I get ready to plant crimson clover in there the fall.
So you plant clover every year? See, mine.
On that
Okay.
trial I did,
Right.
yeah. Because that trial, even though it may go to seed, I'm not counting on it being able to reseed and provide the stand that I need. It experimentally, I mean, I had to replant it, but a lot of people say, well, I got volunteer ryegrass, and that's great if you want to count on that. I would say it's not going to be there every year. I think you had a question.
Statement.
Or statement.
To what he said, what we do with the clover in spring,
Mhm.
if the yellow top, what we call it, is bad enough to spray, I spray the pint or less than a pint to acre, just plain 2,4-D.
That's right.
But I try to graze the clover down first and let the yellow top be a little taller, so he gets most of the chemical.
Yeah.
And don't have no problem losing any clover.
Great. Yeah.
But if you spray it hard in like May or June to get rid of the thistles and everything, you're gonna lose it, the
Right.
clover.
Right.
We did that last year on some. But like you said, the weeds problem outweighed the benefit of the clover. But I do exclusively year-round, and it's tough.
Let me show you real quick. I want to show y'all a picture. All right. So this is so I have a 3-acre deer exclusion fence there at Newton. So there's essentially no animal impact on my forage stands. This was taken. So this is alfalfa, Bulldog 805 alfalfa. Right here on your left, this is Ladino white clover. Right here on your right, they were planted the same day, same fertility, 2 tons a litter, drilled the same day. When we think about perennial clovers, I mean, white clover is a great option, but here's another picture. This is that's your same Bulldog 805. This is Georgia 909 red clover. It's a southern adapted red clover. Most people, like if you got heavier ground, like over in the prairie towards West Point, they have red clover that persists. Most of the time on lighter texture soils, sandier soils, red clover doesn't persist. There are improved varieties that were bred in the southeast that are adapted to some of these lighter texture soils. That is Georgia 909. It's either 909 or 9909 or something like that. And then you've got, that's Ladino right behind it. But my point is to show you lots of different species, tons of varieties. Just, if there's something that you think, well, hey, I'd like something to fit in this window, there's more than likely a forage species that has been developed because you're not the only one with that problem. And so I encourage you to call your county agent or call me or Rocky or somebody. We can.
Don't they fix different rates of nitrogen too?
Yeah.
Alfalfa's more than clovers.
Yeah. So if you're looking at the capacity for these plants to contribute nitrogen to a subsequent crop, vetch, annual clovers, different species have different amounts or different capacities to fix nitrogen. One thing you've got to consider though is like if you're depending on, let's just say, an annual clover to be able to contribute nitrogen to Bahia grass or Bermuda grass in your pasture. All right, typically, I would say an overwhelming majority of the nitrogen from that clover crop only goes to the subsequent grass crop after it's dead. All right, so if you think about the nitrogen that's in that plant, the clover plant is making it for itself. All right, and so it is now an organic source of nutrients. All right, but in order for the grass to take up that nitrogen, that organic source of nitrogen that's in the leaves and in the stems and in the roots of that plant must die. The soil microbes eat it and they convert it into a mineralizable form, an inorganic form, that then the grass then takes up into its roots and then absorbs into its tissue. All right, so most of the time people say, well, I'll just plant a clover and that'll give me all the nitrogen. Well, I mean, that clover makes nitrogen for itself, and there's very little associative nitrogen that's going into the grass that's growing with it. There is some, but it's just a little, but a majority of that nitrogen comes after that plant dies, and then it's released back into the soil.
Who would be our contact, about the different varieties that we may plant going forward? Some of this we've never heard of.
So Marie is your county agent. I would get in contact with her and just tell her, say, hey, I need, you know, a variety of this. She will either point you to, or point you to either myself or Rocky. But all this information is online. So the experiment station, all the extension service, all the publications of all of our variety trial data is online. So if you go to, like if you just type in MSU Forage Variety Testing, you go to that website, you can look at all the yield and quality data of the forages that we have tested over the years, and you can kind of mix and match based off the varietal performance in our trials. But if there's something a little bit more specific, you know, like I said, get in touch with myself or Rocky or Marie, and she can help you find that information.
Question.
Yes, sir.
I saw you go by it. Stockpile fescue protein versus ryegrass.
Okay, stockpiled tall fescue versus ryegrass. All right. It's
Most of our ryegrass will have clover, our fescue has none.
quality wise, it's probably going to be about the same. But when I say that, it depends on how much nitrogen you apply to that fescue to enable it to stockpile.
Yeah.
All right, so you know if you just say I'm stockpiling and you don't apply any nitrogen to it in the fall and you just allow it to grow, it's probably not going to be the same in quality as annual ryegrass that's got clover in it. It's
I normally
probably
do about a ton and a half to acre of litter.
on your fescue.
Fescue.
All right, so if you think about litter, all right, so typically you've got about 30% of the nitrogen that's in that litter is made available immediately, but the rest of it is throughout the year. So it's
It
got
goes off season.
That's right. And so when you put a ton and a half, let's just say it comes back analysis, it's got 60 pounds of nitrogen per ton. So you're looking at what 90 to 100 pounds of nitrogen on that fescue, but it's not immediate. It's
Right.
over a certain window. And then it also goes back into when you start grazing. If I allow that fescue to only accumulate for 60 days, well, I ain't got ryegrass at that time. And so, but if I start grazing my fescue, after the first of the year, and I do have a little bit of ryegrass coming on, then you might be comparable.
My biggest problem with the fescue is with the litter is the summer grasses are still sucking up that nitrogen from
Yeah.
the previous fall's litter.
Yeah,
And I'm thinking about going back to urea for that reason on the fescue.
yeah.
They're trying to keep from pushing the summer grass coming in there and crowding out fescue basically.
Well, what summer grass?
Everything on the,
Crabgrass?
there's very little crabgrass. We used to have a lot, we have very little now. Some of the swamp grass, junk. But I know it's growing, as fast as it grows, it's gotta be, sucking a lot of nitrogen.
Yeah.
For that reason, I cut back on litter a little bit last fall, and I hit it with urea last week, and it jumped, or the week before last.
Right.
And it's like I ain't had none of this in a while, it went to work. Looked like it grew 2 or 3 inches in a week.
Yeah.
It's max Q. Our folks start out now, maybe 31 now. And that's the next question, what's the best variety fescue plant now in North Mississippi?
Well,
That you can find the seed for?
well, really, you're only down to about 2 varieties. I mean, that we can have consistently had, that we can consistently recommend, and that's fescue and Kentucky 31 and Max Q. But
That's about it.
there are other varieties that we have tested, but they do not persist. They don't stay around. Max Q, you've got to manage. I mean, I've had Max Q fields that have been overgrazed and they're gone. But now on Kentucky 31, in my opinion, even though you've got all the other issues with it, it sticks around compared to Max Q.
If I was planting again, I've got max Q now, but I still go back to 31.
I mean, my extension, well, I would like to think that my extension answer and my personal answer are the exact same thing, but I would probably say get my Kentucky 31 up and going, and I would probably include like some sort of white clover, red clover, if it could work, and I don't have any herbicide weed issues. But that's a great mix.
We're wanting to convert, what, 25, 30 acres of mixed summer grass with some fescue in it to mostly fescue. We drilled it before Kentucky 31 and it didn't stay, but we overgrazed it. And that's a hit for somebody like us to take the, 25 acre field out of production for a year and not graze it. And that's what everybody tells me their problem is, we graze it too hard the first year.
Yeah.
So it gets, basically, I guess, gets the roots established.
Yeah.
But I don't,
Because when those seedlings are up, let's just say it's 5 or 6 inches tall, and it looks like you've got a solid stand. In a perennial, they have not had a chance to perenniate, and so they still are an annual at that time, and there is the capacity. So instead of them clipping it off, there's not a developed root system thick enough to hold it in the ground, and so they can pull the plant out when they're grazing it. And it goes back to that stress. If you're a seedling and you're this tall and you ain't got but one set of roots that only goes that tall, and then you clip it off at the ground, I mean, you're stressing that seedling out. It has no other root reserves, because typically on fescue, I mean, it's a perennial, and so it has the capacity to store carbohydrates down in the soil for energy to, when it gets its head chopped off, to come back. If there is no root system there that has those carbohydrates, when you clip it off, it can't come back from anything because it hadn't built anything.
We could go on for hours, I'm sure, here, but we need to move on.
Yeah.
We'd love to have you back, but to expand on this, but I understand that's a long way to come, but,
Yeah, fold the page so you know what to take that.
yeah.
Okay.
But I feel like if y'all got any other questions, I think you can hang around just a few minutes and
Sure. Yeah.
talk with them out in the hall. We'll move on with this. But we appreciate you coming up.
Thank you.
And it has been informative.
Good.
A lot of good
Appreciate it.
things. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.